F-bomb. This is Mandy and the F-bomb. Hey y'all, welcome back to Mandy and the F-bomb. So today we've got on a guest. Her name is Michelle, and she is an attorney here in town for kids that are involved in foster care here in McLennan County. What's neat is that she's also a foster care alumni herself. So she's got a really unique perspective, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from her because we haven't been able to sit down and have a conversation, even though we've crossed paths in different areas. So not only have we crossed paths because of the nonprofit that I work with, but also there's something here in town that's just started up. It's a foster care coalition, just so that we can get everyone kind of who's involved and all the stakeholders on the same page so that we can more efficiently serve the foster care community. And she and I are both on the steering committee together. So we've had a chance to kind of talk to each other just a little bit, but not really have a conversation. I've been so interested in your story. So thanks for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. So steering committee, I think, is when we first had the opportunity to meet.
Yes, but it's Foster Village, Waco, and I've known some people that have been able to utilize those services, and it's just been amazing. I've heard tons of good things.
Good. And that's how we got personally connected, because after the steering committee, you reached out to me via just email. Okay.
I think to tell you how awesome you are, or your organization, one of the two.
We've got some really good volunteers for sure. So whenever you reached out to me, you were like, I have a unique perspective. I'm an ad litem, but also I was involved in foster care myself.
And I also represent parents. I would probably represent parents primarily.
Really?
Yes. Yes, and I was in foster care myself, and I relate really well to my clients.
I bet.
So
okay. There's so many points of origin that we can start from here. I guess if you don't mind, I want to know a little bit about your story and what kind of led you towards being an ad litem or being kind of a representative of people involved in foster care. Because I feel like sometimes stories I've heard from other people, they kind of go the opposite direction, don't want any association with foster care anymore.
Well, that's what I wanted.
Oh, okay.
That was my goal. And it just hasn't
tell me
worked
about
out.
that. And then you're on the steering committee too. So you're just getting in deeper, girlfriend.
That's all I do is I just keep digging my hole deeper.
I don't mind it.
Most days I don't mind it either. I would say that, well, my time as a youth in foster care, when I turned 18, I ran. I wanted nothing to do with anything that had to do with foster care because of my experience. Then when I finished my bachelor's degree, I really needed a job where I made more money than what I was currently making, and CPS was hiring. And I was like, I can do this.
Well, because you know the system, right?
Right. It can't be that hard.
Mm-hmm.
So I applied for and became an investigator with Child Protective Services. And after just under 3 years of that, I realized that is not for me because I wasn't helping people. I got to the point to where I felt like I was hurting families more than helping them, and that's not what I wanted.
Okay, so a couple things there. One, I'm wondering if as you were looking at this opportunity to work for CPS, were you thinking about investigators that you were involved with as a kid and just going, I can do that. Like, I know what this job kind of looks like.
I mean, yeah, because whenever I was a kid, came out, they talked to me for like 2 minutes and then they left, and then I never saw them again. And then I was in foster care. So I just that's too easy. You spend 5 minutes with somebody and, there's a whole lot of other things that go on.
Of course,
obviously.
But that was your view as a youth involved in foster care. And that's good to know. Okay. And then you realized it wasn't for you because you were hurting families, you felt like.
I did.
Can you tell me about that a little bit?
Families need help. Sometimes that help isn't a removal. Sometimes that help is resources. Sometimes that help is stuff that can be easily obtained without removing kids.
Mm-hmm.
And without sharing too much, I mean, I had a case one time, substandard housing.
Mm-hmm.
I had a family that I met with that had literally a giant hole in their living room floor in their trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And it was wintertime, cold, special needs child in the home. CPS, we should remove. And but that just destroys a family and it doesn't really help the problem. So CPS, and I'm sure they still have this available, they had concrete funds. And so I applied for those to get building materials.
Mm-hmm.
I did a quote through Lowe's to figure out everything that we would need. They had some church volunteers that ended up coming in, going to pick up the lumber, fix the hole in the floor. Family stays together. But not every case ends up like that.
Of course.
Because as a worker, your boots on the ground, you have supervisors that you have to answer to. And so depending on who the supervisor is, sometimes you don't get an opportunity to get those resources for people, and you just remove.
So, and that's obviously one very unique example, but you have other stories, I'm sure, in your head just going like, this is not a parents are actively putting these kids or kiddo in danger. This is, they don't have the resources and they're parents that love their kid.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've seen that a lot as well. Heard of that a lot, I should say, as well, where we've got parents that are lacking resources or lacking experience in how to acquire resources or parent in healthy ways or break the cycles that they're in, and they earnestly, desperately love their kiddos.
Absolutely.
And are wanting the tools and the resources to be able to be better. But a lot of times, it, like you said, it's not just that. I think, and you need to correct me if I'm wrong because I didn't work for CPS, but it's not necessarily that just that our caseworkers, our investigators don't, may not have access to funds that are allocated for specific things, or maybe it's not just the red tape of supervisors and stuff like that. It's also, at least right now, during this placement crisis, they are overloaded and overworked. And right now it's kind of the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Oh, absolutely.
And so instead of going, this is a problem that is a fixable problem, so I'm going to spend time and my own time and energy resources fixing this problem. It's kind of like, what's the immediate solution over here? Then this problem over here that maybe wasn't a huge problem before turns into a bigger problem. And then that's the fire that they have to put out. Right. And it's kind of going from fire to fire rather than just being able to do kind of maintenance work to make sure it doesn't get that bad.
Absolutely. The system is entirely too congested, overwhelmed. I know plenty of CPS workers, and I feel for them because I know that they are doing the best that they can. I know they're overwhelmed, and when you do have limited resources, and and I think part of that's why I like the steering committee. It's let's get all this information together so that way we can start sharing this, because there are so many things that I've learned.
Yeah.
And I've been in McLennan County since the end of 2018 dealing with CPS stuff. So many resources I've never even heard of, and they've been around for years. And so I think just part of that is getting that information and that knowledge out to people, so that way maybe we can find other alternatives as opposed to just putting more kids into the system that's already overburdened.
And already we don't have enough homes, enough beds for children that are in care.
Right. And I've never had to sleep on the floor of a CPS office whenever I was a child. As an adult, I did whenever I worked there, because sometimes it was just easier than the drive home, late nights. But it's something that desperately needs to be fixed.
Absolutely. Okay, so you were a young kid. You started working with CPS. You were like, this is absolutely not for me because I am not positively affecting this problem.
Right. And so I then, because I want to go as far away from CPS as possible, out of sight, out of mind. Right. So I I got a job with an insurance agency, and I went to school and got my license to sell auto insurance. So boring.
That's definitely
Yeah.
a step away from CPS.
So boring. And then one of my good friends told me that I should go to law school, and there was this whole like, definitely not smart enough for law school, and I definitely don't have the money for law school. Single parent, 3 kids. Yeah, I'm not making like very much money. I'm making like $12 an hour plus some commission. Like, there's no way that
You're like, absolutely not.
There's no way I can disrupt my life like that and go to law school. And I guess I just had enough people telling me that I should do it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take the LSAT, but I'm only going to take it one time. And whatever score I get, that's what I get.
That's going to determine what you do.
Right.
Huh?
And I'm going to apply to law schools. And if I get in, great. And if I don't, I'm going to go about my day and just find something else to do with my life. And so I took the LSAT one time. I only applied to 2 law schools because every school has an application fee. And I'm like, every time I apply, that's like $50 or $100 or however much it was.
Yeah, and you're
like, away from
a
my
mom
budget.
with 3 kids.
Yeah, like,
yeah.
So I'm not. And then, but I will say, like, the first one I applied to just because they had really low standards, so I thought I had a good chance of getting in. And then I ended up going to an open house at UNT Dallas, which is where I ended up going to law school at, because they were a brand new law school. They're very public service minded. Mm-hmm. And I went up there for an open house, and Dean Ferguson was talking just about the mission of the school and all that public service stuff. And that made me want to go to law school. And then I applied because I needed to apply because time frames and everything. And I was like, I'm not applying to anywhere else, because if I don't get in there, I don't want to go anywhere else. But then I started having all these feelings like, oh man, I should have studied more for that LSAT. Oh man, I should have done all these. I should have.
So you're more invested than you thought you were.
Right, because I didn't know that lawyers could be caring people. How's that?
Yeah. Well, so again, kind of linking this all back to your experience growing up. Again, attorneys that work with kiddos are also overloaded a lot of times and don't have time to spend time. Not all the time. We've had some really, really wonderful attorneys for the kids that have been in our home. But I know that sometimes they just don't have time to build a relationship with their clients and really get invested. And so I can imagine you as a kid going like, okay, well, there's another adult that I have to see for 2 minutes that's like making decisions about my life.
Yeah. I will say that my attorney, and I was able to actually talk to her a few months ago. I've realized.
Wait, hold on. Your attorney?
From my ad litem whenever I was a kid.
And you got to talk to her a few months ago.
Yeah, I did. I reached out to her because it's kind of, I have all these, like, everything's a story and it's long, and I'm sorry, everything gets sidetracked. But
please.
So what had happened was I was having this conversation with my husband, because I'm married now. I got married like 2 weeks before COVID, okay?
Everything is like before COVID.
Right, because that's really
BC.
Whenever.
And when did we start again?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. So we're sitting on our front porch, because we have a great front porch for sitting. And like, he's telling me things like he remembers as a child. And I'm like, I don't remember. Like, and so I'm like, I got so frustrated. Like, I started crying because I could not remember these huge periods of time in my life that were really significant that I should remember. And so I was talking to a friend of mine who she's a full-time ad litem for kids. And she was like, that's trauma. She was like, you're blocking that. And I'm like, but why? Like, I'm in my 30s.
Like, and you're telling yourself, like, I'm safe now.
Right. I should be able to remember things that happened to me. And I realized, like, there's so much from the time that I went to stay in the shelter, which was right before I went into care.
Can I ask how old you were?
I was 14.
Okay. So
from that time until the time that I aged out, like, there's so much that's missing. You know, there's 4 years of my life, and I'm, have like a dozen stories that don't encompass 4 years. And so I was like, I want to find my story. So let me see what I can do about getting my records, my court papers, just something. Because here they write court reports. And I was in Arizona at the time. But I'm assuming that they had the right court reports too. So someone has written down some things about my life somewhere. So I want to track those down. I'm still in the process. It is not easy to get records, especially
out of state,
post-COVID. So,
yeah.
Or actually, 'cause we're still active in COVID, but it's just hard. And so I'm still working on that. And I forgot where I was going.
You spoke with your ad litem.
Oh yeah, so I called my ad litem in Arizona. I called her office, and they were kind of like, "Who are you and why? Like, how long ago was that?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Can I just leave my name and my number for her?" And I left my maiden name so that way she would know who I was. Hopefully, I was going off that I was memorable. So
I'm sure you were.
So a couple weeks go by and I have not heard back. And I was like, she doesn't remember me, or maybe like she does. And she's like, oh no, I'm not calling her. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because my CASA, who I actually still keep in contact with as well.
I love that.
Yeah. Like these were some of my caseworkers I keep in contact with too. Because these were people that were huge parts of my life. Now, not all of my caseworkers are good. I had about 8 of them. The last one that I had,
in the 4 years that you were in care.
But the last one that I had, she was awesome. She didn't tolerate any of my crap, and so her I stay in touch with. And then there's a staff member from the shelter that I lived at a lot that I keep in touch with. And my CASA. I was her very first CASA kid. But I could do a whole show on just CASA and how important CASA is for kids. But so anyway, so I reached out to my attorney again, and I actually reached her this time. She was actually in the process of leaving the public defender's office, and she took a job with the state of Arizona. And so I just happened to catch her there, and then she tells me that they had a fire in their office at one point, but she doesn't know if my records were in that. But the beginning of the year of 2020, they destroyed all the old records that they were legally allowed to, which mine would have been in there. So,
oh my gosh.
So now my option is at the courthouse they're filed, but I cannot. I think I just have to go in person.
Yeah, you have to go in person.
Yeah, because they're not going to give me that stuff because I was a kid and whatever rules and laws they have in place. So,
oh my gosh.
So yeah, so that's a journey trying to find my story or all of my story
and piece it together.
Yes.
So I just want to, first off, I think it's really, really freaking brave for you not to remember and still want to go like, I know there's some trauma there. I'm going to go figure out what it was so I can put my story together. Because I think sometimes we kind of hear people go, let's just kind of let it lie because I'm blocking it out for a reason. But I feel like in this kind of journey towards wholeness, it's so important for you to kind of dig into that stuff. And I'm assuming you've got a really good support system so that you can, like with your husband and maybe
absolutely.
friends and stuff, so that you can do that. And it sounds like you feel confident and supported enough to be able to take that journey. I think that's really, really neat.
I do. I have a friend that's already lined up whenever I get them with booze, and we're going to stay up and read and
it's like
and drink.
Perfect.
Because
also,
that's what we would need.
Yeah, for sure. I also wanted to say that you are so not alone. So I was not involved in foster care as a kiddo, but I had my own types of trauma in my childhood. And I was speaking to a friend from high school recently, and they were going like, do you remember this? Do you remember this? We've had conversations like, do you remember this? And the answer is no. I don't remember huge portions of 14 to 18 high school years.
That makes me feel better.
Because,
bad,
and
better.
I just don't. I remember what's interesting is and I don't know if it's the same for you, the memories that I do recall, I can remember maybe a dozen, but the majority of them are hard memories that I attach like negative feelings to, or shame. And there are few happy, good memories. Now, if my friend were to bring something up, it's almost like I can remember, like, I don't know, it's foggy, but I'm like, oh, I think maybe I remember that. but the ones that are vivid are ones that I associate with shame.
I would 100,000% agree with that.
Okay. Just letting you know, sister, you are not alone.
And I think that's so after law school and coming here and starting to do with CPS stuff, which I did not want to do. Okay. I feel like, I don't know, there's bigger powers at play, whatever it may be. Here I am. And this is where I'm at, and I'm committed now.
I'm so glad.
But the whole process, and even into my 30s, I still had so much, and I hated calling it trauma. I hated how much everyone used the word trauma, because trauma sounds so bad. Like I'm broken. And the whole thing is, like, I know I'm broken. I don't need anyone to tell me. I don't need that label of trauma. I already know. But it took a lot for me to realize that, you know, the pattern of behavior that I had, that I've continued on despite or in spite of, like, I mean, I have a lot of good things that people see, me going to school, raising my children, all these good things. But I had a lot of things that no one saw that was all a product of that trauma. And I didn't want to really address it, because then it makes everything real. And then I was doing things that were shameful or not, you know, a lot of skeletons in the closet. Maybe that's the best way to put it. And then, you know, coming here and then getting into this, I still realized I had a lot of things that I was doing that were not good for me. They're not good for my mental health. They're going to keep holding me back. I destroy things. I destroy relationships because I'm afraid of people.
Oh, because they leave, right?
Oh, people always leave. 90 days. 90 days. I will cry. I'm sorry. It's a lot. But I realized, like, for me to get married to the man that I'm married to now, like, that was a lot, because my whole dating relationships before then were roughly 90 days. And I've learned that 90 days is about how long I've always stayed in places.
There's a connection.
And so it's always, you're here in this placement, foster parents, great, nice people, here for a little bit, and then you're gone. Shelters, you're there, you're gone. And I mean, I'll be the first.
And these are 90-day cycles.
Yeah, roughly. Like, from what I remember, just based on, because I don't have a whole lot of memories, it takes a lot for me to piece things together. I was never any one place very long, and I was always, you know, it was always like, I can't stay here any longer. So, but it took a whole, let me back up. I'm just going to go into, like, my time frame as a youth, because it'll kind of help you piece things together. I went into care, and I was staying in an emergency or a youth shelter. I stayed there until I went to my first foster placement, which was actually my English teacher at high school and her husband. She really liked me. I used to write a lot. Journalism was my thing. And she just wanted to take me. And I should mention that I also had a child. I had my oldest, Cameron, at that time. And so he was not in foster care. Only I was. So anyone that took us in would essentially only get paid for me, but not for him. So I went there, and I thought that was because they chose me. Makes you feel really good when people choose you.
Absolutely.
And then it makes you feel really bad when people that choose you don't want you.
Absolutely.
So that was a placement, and then I went back to that same shelter. And I loved the people at that shelter because they were always there, because they were paid to work there. And they were always there. And they always cared for me, and they helped me, you know, learn things about child development, because I had a kid and I didn't know what I was doing with a kid. But, you know, because when you're 14, you have no idea what it takes to raise a child.
No, because you are a child.
Yeah, and developmental milestones, like, when do they start walking? Like, and so I had a whole group of people that helped me along the way. And then from there, I went to another foster home, which was a couple from church who chose me because they wanted to do this for me. That did not last. And I never knew why they sent me away until I was an adult. This is the saddest story ever. I'm so sorry, but I have to tell it because this was a big thing in my life and maybe why I'm not a huge fan of the holidays. Um, it was right before Christmas, and I don't remember if it was Christmas Eve or my caseworker showed up, and this is a caseworker that I did not like. She was not very kind. She asked me if I was ready to go, and I was like, "Go where?" I thought she was bringing by gifts because that's what caseworkers do around Christmas time. They bring and drop off gifts. And she was like, "You're leaving. You're going back to the shelter." And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "They didn't tell you?" And I was like, "No." I had like 10, 15 minutes to pack up all of mine and my son's stuff and leave. And back to the shelter. So, so back to the shelter, and I'm there. And caseworker comes by, and they have some placement options. One is a couple that live out on a ranch and, whatever. And they're willing to take me and Cameron. And the other is essentially not really a shelter, not really a group home either. It's a really cool place, and I would love to see something like this here in Texas. But there's no foster parents. It's like a group home, but you have your own little apartment.
Oh, it's kind of like a assisted living kind of, or like a transitional facility.
Yes, and I was only 16 at the time. That's exactly what it was, and it was really cool because you give them 60% of whatever money you get, and they put it into savings for you. So whenever you leave, you have money to set up your own apartment, and it was really cool. And I chose that over the foster placement because, well, one, it's not people that are going to say they want you and then kick you out again.
You're protecting yourself.
And so I went up to Phoenix and was living there, and it was not good, and I made some very poor choices. And I realized that I was making very poor choices. And so I was working. I mean, that's when I've always worked. So I was working. I used my paycheck, and I bought a plane ticket to Ohio because whenever I was a kid, we had lived in Ohio some, and my mom had a friend up there that I really liked. And so I essentially ran away. I ran away, went to Ohio, and I stayed up there until they found me. My CASA worker showed up with the police at my job up there and made me go back to Arizona. And then I ended up another foster home. Before I went to that foster home, I was in another foster home that was like I don't really remember this place because as soon as we got back to Arizona, they took my son from me. Because they knew that they were afraid I was going to run. This is what they told me. They were afraid I was going to run again, but they knew if I didn't have my son, I wouldn't leave. And they were absolutely right. I don't know how long, because I don't remember. I don't know how long I was without my child.
Because you blocked it out.
Because I don't remember.
Yeah.
But then we went to a foster home, and he was there with me. And my attorney, because the department wanted to keep my son because it would be easier for them to find him a home because he's young, people to adopt him, than it would be people to take us together. This is way more than what I was planning on talking about today, but it's fine. But my attorney, thank goodness, talked to the judge, and I think that I even spoke to the judge as well, and Arizona has an independent living program that you can start when you're 17. And I was almost 17. And so it was essentially like, you guys can stay here together in this foster home. And when you turn 17, you can go into the independent living program. But if I mess up, I'm losing everything. So I stayed in my foster home, and I behaved, I got a job, I did all the things, and I just waited until my 17th birthday. And then I got my own apartment, started going to college, working, and then that's the bulk, and then I ended up aging out, and I opted to get out whenever I was 18.
No wonder. No wonder it was hard for you to let people commit to you or choose you, because people that choose you. And because you had said earlier, I destroy things, I destroy relationships. Because if you do it first,
Right.
then you're safe.
Yeah. But the whole thing is like, I don't ever, and my husband can tell you joking stories because I was still in my healing process. And whenever we first started dating, because I really didn't want to date him. I really didn't, because I knew I was not in a good place. But I was also still not going to break up with him. He was going to break up with me, because then it solidifies, every feeling I've had that everyone always leaves me.
Confirms everything, right?
But as an adult, I had started doing it. Like, I'm the one that's actually becoming self-destructive, because I'm setting everybody up to break up with me. But then it's your fault because, and it's hard. It's hard to, one, admit to yourself that you really are the problem, but then also to get help for that.
Yeah,
and
that's
so,
right.
Because I didn't like being like that. I don't. I want to have close relationships with people. I want to have friends. I want to have people that I can trust. And so that's much better now. It's taken a long road, but I will tell you, like, my last bout of therapy that I went through, which was probably the most beneficial. And I try to get a lot of my parents that have a lot of trauma to go to EMDR therapy, because it does wonders. And like, that's personal experience. That's not like word on the street. No, I did that because, like I said, I feel like I can relate to my clients a lot, because I've been there. Like, I know that pain that you felt when CPS took your children away. I have been there. And so getting that help, being able to form better relationships and learn how to trust people, and that not all people are bad and not everyone is going to leave you. So that's my background. That's the short version of a very long story.
Jesus.
So,
and now you're helping people. Mandy and the F-Bomb is produced by Rogue Media. Make sure to like and follow us on social media, and you can find our show anywhere you get podcasts or at roguemedianetwork.com.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.